They're not going to take that money back out of the economy if there's no growth. So what do you do if you get higher and higher inflation and have zero growth? That's what happened in Japan. That's the stagflation that happened in the 1970s. People and Republicans in general like to say, our future generations will pay for this deficit. It's awful that we're passing it down to our kids and our grandkids. And I think that's true. But there's something that's even a little scarier that may be true. You may be beginning to pay for this deficit next year through higher prices. What if we have 1979 again? We had 18 to 20% inflation rate, and we had 20% interest rates. They tend to sort of mirror each other as they go up. What if we have that? What happens to people on fixed income and lower income? And where I say someone like myself might have a better chance than the traditional career politician in the fall is that I'm not afraid to self-examine our party. I'm not afraid to take some of the blame, our party, for the deficit and say we have to do something different. I'm also not afraid to say some of those guys need to come home, both Republican and Democrat, that we need more turnover in Washington, that we need new leadership. But I'm also, I think, have the ability to appeal and to say this message can appeal to independents and moderates and conservative Democrats, not by moderating the message, but by presenting it in an acceptable way. For example, if I were lucky enough to win the primary and get to the general election, the message would be that deficits cause inflation, and inflation hurts people the worst, who are the lower socioeconomic class, the working class, and those on fixed income, because then it can never catch up. You know, if price inflation is 20% and the cost of living raise that they voted in a year ago is 2.1%, those people are all going to feel the squeeze. So I think we can present our message. It isn't that we're going to provide more handouts for people, but we're going to try to say we have to get government under control, we have to get inflation under control and get deficits under control, and we present it to the public in a way that we can win with our message. There are Republicans who give up on that. In our state, there's about 40% Republican and 40% Democrat. There's about 20% in the middle. Many people say once you win the primary, you've got to run to the center. What does that mean? Give up your message and start using the message of the Democrats. And we've seen that, and it kind of works to an extent. We have had Republicans win who say, you know what, I can get you more federal projects than the Democrats can because I have more seniority. If that's our message, I wouldn't drive up here and on a beautiful day, and it is nice to be with you, but I could be with my kids today or my wife, although they went to a family gathering I didn't really want to go to anyway. So I'm not really being completely honest there. But, you know, I think there is a way to present our message without giving up the message that can be acceptable and bring new people in. And what I am finding, what I'm telling people throughout this, and I really appreciate Barry inviting me, is not everybody in the Republican Party is open to hearing new people. They've just sort of decided that the hierarchy is going to select people and that's it. The problem with that is if we take that attitude, we are a shrinking party. They're now saying 20% of the public will identify firmly with the Republicans. There's a few more that kind of are, but we're shrinking and shrinking. I gave speeches in 10 states over the last 2 years during the presidential campaign, and the main message I would start with was the main news of the primary season is not who your nominee will be, it's how small your primary has become. Traditionally, Republican states, New Hampshire, Indiana, North Carolina, always had been generally leaning Republican or Republican, are all now Democrat. We're losing people. We need to have a new message, and it needs to be a message that attracts people. I mean, I like the fact that I go give speeches sometimes, and there are some people with long hair or people with a funny-looking earring or whatever. We can't all be suit and tie and be the Chamber of Commerce, or that's what we'll be, 20% of the public. We need to attract these new people and present our message in a way that doesn't beat people over the head and say, you've got to act just like me, you've got to live your life just like me. We need something that's an open message that says, we don't want the federal government involved in most of the economic things, but we don't necessarily have to have them involved in our personal lives either. So there are ways that you can present a message that is more a tolerant message and isn't beating people over the head saying, you have to act and look just like me. So I think we can accept and bring new people into the party with this message, and I hope you will think about and consider my candidacy. I probably going to have to leave pretty soon because we're going down to Jessamine County, but if Barry says it's okay, I'd take a few questions.
Sure.
All right. Yes.
Keep talking about a new ideal and new policy. What is it?
The new policy that would be different than some others, you think, is how would it be different? I think that one of the new policies would be that we should introduce a balanced budget. 32 states out of 50 actually have a balanced budget. And you look at the disaster that is California right now, and we're going to pay for it here because they're going to go bankrupt as a state probably, and we will have to pay for it. Rules work. Politicians in general are not very believable and not very honest on some level. They may be honest and good people and go to church and things, but they want to continue to be elected, so they tend to say and do many things, and this is on both sides of the aisle. So I think we need a rule. And I think the rule should be to balance the budget. I think we may need a rule to limit the terms of people in office so we get more of a changeover. One of the rules I've accepted is I've signed a pledge not to raise taxes. I've also signed the 9/12 pledge. I can't recite the whole thing, but I do believe in the 9/12 pledge as well that Glenn Beck's group got started. So, I mean, there are a lot of things we can do, but the hard part is you may get another candidate that stands up and says all these things and they're for free enterprise. You have to decide who can articulate the message, but we have to have a contrast. Right now, the contrast in Washington is 1.75 trillion versus 500 billion. Not much contrast. The other thing you have to do, and how my message is, I think, different than other Republicans, is that many Republicans say the military budget, cannot touch it. We cannot ever cut anything in the military budget because that's our national defense. I think that the Constitution says that the primary enumerated function of government is national defense. So I think it is the most important thing that the federal government does and should always be the priority. Once I say that, though, it doesn't mean that I believe that all military spending is warranted. We must define what is national defense, and we must spend the money wisely. The Grace Commission 30 years ago talked about $500 wrenches and $200 hammers. 2 years ago, we gave a $1 billion no-bid contract to Halliburton. You know, we had GIs dying in Iraq from faulty showers. I mean, that's inexcusable. We had an Olympic pool in Iraq that they said they were going to change the fixtures on. They came in and they spray painted them white or silver. They spray painted all the fixtures to look like they were brand new fixtures for $1 million. You know, so we can't just say that government's very wasteful and we're Republicans. If we can just cut off that welfare queen, we can balance the budget. One, there's not enough welfare queens to cut off to balance the budget. Do I think we should have less welfare at the federal level? Yes. But you have to look at the entire budget. For example, if you truly believed in a balanced budget, you might have to come up with something simple like, I propose that we introduce the budget from 2005 next year. That'd raise a lot of eyebrows. What would happen? You can imagine what 2005's budget is. It'd still be huge, though. It doesn't mean I don't believe in any government. Our budget now is $3.75 trillion. 2005 might be $2.8 trillion. But, you know, next year we're only bringing in $2.2 trillion. So, I mean, it's just amazing, the mismatch. And I think we need to look at government the way we look at our private business. In a recession, we've got to cut back. Why should the government increase in the times of recession instead of cutting back? So I think I can present the message a little bit differently, but I think I also present the message that capitalism works, that capitalism is the most humane